Welcome to Right Out Loud. I'm Matt, of course, your enthusiastic guide to the playground of prose, where we discuss everything from spine-tingling plots to heartwarming narratives. Alongside me is my brilliant co-host, Christina, whose vibrant personality is as colorful as a painter's palette. Christina is not only a dazzling conversationalist, but also an imaginative genius with a knack for turning the mundane into the magical. Her spirited insights and joyous laughter are sure to keep you entertained and inspired. So grab your favorite writing snack, settle in, and let's embark on this delightful journey together. Welcome to Right Out Loud, where your voice is the story we're telling.
Wow. Someone did some writing work this weekend.
No, someone invoked ChatGPT and said, write me an introduction and make it as colorful about Christina as possible. So I thought I was surprised.
Known an AI wrote that and not you.
Yes. But in all seriousness, that is not what tonight is about. We are here and we are very excited to be joined by the co-hosts of Literally Books. We've got Magda and Lindsey. Welcome both.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
I look
Thank
forward
you
to
for
your
having us.
intros every week for Christina. I'm like, man, Mike and I are really not great to each other. We're just like, hey, what's up?
I know. Let's do this thing.
All right.
You know, the funny thing is that Matt has been this way his whole entire life. I mean, we've known each
That's
other
true.
for 30 years, Matt,
Yeah, probably.
going on. And he is, I mean, you should have seen me in my 20s. Like when this first started happening, it was like, who is this? And why are they complimenting me? So yeah, it's
It's
you kind
lavishing
of get
praise.
used to it. But you never get used to the way he does it. Never.
I think whenever I need a pick me up, I'm just gonna call you, Matt.
Yes, you
Yes.
absolutely can.
Yes.
It's like my intro song.
Yep.
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 You absolutely can.
Absolutely. He's the best at that. He is the best at that. And hugs. And unfortunately,
Hugs.
we're all in separate places, so you
Yeah.
can't experience that. But his hugs are the best.
Exactly. Well, we have decided to bring our friends with us on this little journey because we want to talk a little bit about what readers want and just kind of get in there. Because I think if you're not familiar with Literally Books, what are you doing with your life? First of all, fantastic podcast. You really should listen. I mean, they have video. They have video. You can actually see them, right? It's even better. But the stories they tell, the way that they kind of really delve into the stories and just dissect them and explore them and sort of, it's almost like sipping from a fine wine and letting it sit for a second on your tongue. That's what they do with those books. And it just brings it to life for me. So I love it. You should love it. And we're very happy to have them here.
There have been numerous times that, pad and pencil and writing down what books they talk about, recommend. There have been times, oh God, and I'm going to forget the name. Was it Andy Weir? I forget the title of the one. And I'm like, you guys, the way
Project Hail Mary.
Yeah. The way you guys explain that, it's normally not my type of book that I pick up, but just the way that you talked about it was just like, oh my God, this is a must read.
Yeah.
I'm getting fidgety over here. This is too many. We didn't write these books. We just really love
Yes.
to read.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we felt like the discussion was really proper for this because, again, as we sort of said, like your podcast is focused on the stories, right? And the books and the things that you enjoy and sometimes not enjoy, but mostly enjoy. And we think for you listening, like if you're looking for ideas, this is the perfect time for us to come together and sort of help you think about what that next great story might be.
Yeah. The reason why I wanted to do this topic is, sometimes writers in their little room, it's solitary. I also think that the view from a writer they're not sitting there going, okay, what do readers want? What is their perspective? Because, and by all means, they really shouldn't when they're actually writing. But I think sometimes that it's a little bit of an unknown. And I thought we could explore some thoughts on the market itself, where an author comes from, some of those things. Are they influential to what it is that you pick up?
So I guess the first question is there any sort of topics out there that you just are hoping someone's going to write, or any ideas that you've just been pining for? Like, if we could just get a novel that tells this kind of story.
Is there a void? Is there like, man, if only someone would write this, like, I think it would explode the world and they become the next best-selling author.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's a void per se, but like I feel like we live in a pretty lucky time where, like, I think Christina, we were chatting offline about it. Like now authors are able to kind of self-publish, and we get so much content, and we're so lucky that we get to consume all kinds of different genres. And I don't know, like personally, when I find something that I love to read, like I think last year, I think it was my romantasy era, that it was just like nonstop, just like, I just need to read everything that is romantasy and I just need to consume it as quick as possible. And then you start going down this path of like readers like this, and then you start reading, and then you start kind of deviating from the original intent of what you were trying to get to. You're like, no, that was too far in the wrong direction. I need to kind of come back into my little romantasy genre. So we're just really lucky to be able to kind of have so much content out there from either traditionally published authors or independently published ones. And it's just about finding the right niche that you're going to be reading, at least personally.
Yeah, I'm going to steal from Rick Rubin a little bit, because he has this like great quote about like not focusing on what the audience wants, but focusing on what you all want as the creator, and how like that's the difference between art and commerce. Is commerce is worrying about the audience, art is being the creator and worrying about what feels natural to you. And for me, I think what I want more of is like specificity in perspectives. Like I think sometimes artists feel like they need to write in a way, particularly like artists in more marginalized groups, they take on the onus of having to write on behalf of the entire group. And so it has to be sort of more, dilute. And I love it when I read a story that I'm like, this is like no one I've read. I want 7 million pages on this person because it's like nothing else. So that's where I feel like I get really caught up in any kind of creator, is when it's something that only that creator could do.
I think, Lindsey, what you're saying brings to mind a lot of writers tend to get their start because they can't find what it is that they're looking for. And they go, okay, it's not out there. I'm going to write it for myself. Like, I really don't. And that's not necessarily where my question came from with, filling the void. It was more, this desire to write. It's always there, but it's actually when you notice, okay, this book was missing this book was missing this, there isn't a full picture. So I think when they start writing for themselves, I think they write better, because I think if they actually do go in there, and again, this is really why I wanted to do this episode, is if they go in there going, what do readers want? What do readers want? I think they're always chasing something rather than figuring out what story they want to tell, or what they're driven to, or what they're passionate about. Because the one thing that sometimes I think, in terms of like not void as in topic, but void as in feelings, like there's not enough funny books out there, or there's not enough stories that are just pure joy. First, I've got to go through all this angst, before I can get to the ending. And then some aren't guaranteed that happy ending like that. So yeah, I think that's really, really interesting.
I think it's one of those things too, where the question becomes a little possibly perilous, because you start thinking about what do people want? What, to your point, what do people want? What do they want? And then you start chasing trends because you're like, oh, well, this is getting hot. And then you start, and honestly, by the time it's a trend, it's almost too late, right? Like it's almost too late. It isn't too late.
Unless you are that one person that says there's a million vampire stories out there, but I've got a great idea, and you write one. That to me was kind of a little bit of the J.R. Ward. At the time that she was coming out, Christine Feehan was huge. Stephanie Meyer was huge. I mean, there were all these vampire authors. She said, I'm going to do it just a little different. And it was great. And she's, made quite a career out of writing them.
Yeah. And I think like I mentioned earlier, like last year when we went to see year, like I read so many different books that were written after the whole hype with like Fourth Wing and Sarah J. Maas. And you can kind of start reading the quality of the stories is not what I was used to, because I think that authenticity is no longer there. And I'm like, I already know what you're going to take me through. Like, I already know like step by step what like this chapter is going to do, or this part of the book. It's come kind of like what you guys were mentioning earlier, which is just kind of trying to write something that you truly enjoy, because I think that joy is going to transmit through when the reader is actually reading the story. Like if you're just going through, hey, I think this is going to be popular, I don't think us as readers are going to be able to kind of capitalize on what you're trying to kind of tell us.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. The authenticity isn't there. The emotion, the passion, the excitement of the writer coming to the computer to be excited about the story. I mean, during the first couple of years of my editing and coaching business, I did free 30-minute sessions. And it was so interesting because there was a pattern over and over again. Every single author wanted to know how to make more money. But every single one of those authors was writing in a genre they hated. They were writing romance because it sells and they want to make money. But most of them wanted to write something different. I mean, they were all actually different genres like mystery and, other things. And they just felt like if they could romance into it, it would work out. So yeah, that authenticity, that you can feel it. You can feel it. Yeah. That kind of segues into another question I had about, the traditionally published and self-published and authenticity. I was just reading that some metrics, it's by Written Word Media. Matt will link up to the article itself on our website. But it says 76.2% of authors are self-published. 16% are hybrids, meaning they both self-publish and traditionally publish. And 7.8% are just traditionally published. Do any of those things have meaning for you as a reader? Like when you are searching out those books to review for the podcast, or even just select for yourself, do you tend to shy away from self-publish, be wary of it, or get excited about it because, oh gosh, I'm going to get something totally unlike anything else I've read? Or do you swing the other way? I actually have one reviewer friend that she will not review anything self-published. She is strictly a traditional published, but she's print media. She's print media review. So she sells her review first. She's syndicated with like a circulation of 250,000. So I can kind of understand she'd be too overwhelmed with the sheer number of self-published authors. So, but what do you guys think? Is there connotations for you for either one?
I don't really pay too much attention to the publishers. I think I get a lot of my recommendations from like word of mouth. That could either be friends, family members, or like people that I work with. And I don't normally go through like, oh, I want to see who like I think I just recently started kind of learning who's like Red Tower Publishing, because they make some beautiful copies. And that's it. Like, I think outside of that, like I am really clueless to a lot of like who's publishing what or who's doing what. And I think it's just mostly comes from like what are other readers enjoying and are they liking it? Which can be a double-edged sword, I guess, because if like they don't come from a traditionally published company, they might not get as much advertisement or publicity as we would want. So maybe some of those stories could potentially get buried. And I do understand that, but like I'm still kind of relying quite heavily on recommendations from friends and family. I don't really go through like Goodreads anymore. Goodreads has let me down multiple times. So basically a lot of like what my friends and family are reading, and then I kind of start getting into that as well.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Magda. I don't necessarily care as much about where it comes from, but I am going to say something maybe that's like a bit of a hot take, which is I do think that authors, not to toot your horn, Christina, but I think you have to have an editor. Like you have to have, and maybe that's because like I also came up in like a workshop environment in my like experience with reading and writing, but I very much believe that you need someone there to make you like cut your little darlings and things that just don't belong that you're too attached to. And it's way too hard to be super objective about your own art. And I do lean into like a traditionally published book in that way. And then I think that there are some like necessary vets that process goes through that makes the art stronger overall.
For me, even just as a reader, like you, Magda, like I'm done with Goodreads. I've not found anything good off of there. I am usually someone who is like, oh, they're really like, again, I think we spoke about this earlier before podcast. There was a really great book that you guys were talking about that's normally not my genre. And I'm like, I've got to read this book. And so I really do go by recommendations. Sometimes simply because of the job, and even back when I was at Borders, it was always, publishers either sending me copies of stuff they wanted me to read. Now we, read a lot for the podcast. If we've got a guest on, we read that. So I'm being introduced in a different way to, things I normally would not read. But I do, on the other piece of it, as an editor, I do have trouble unless it's a really fantastic story that I will overlook grammar, other things that an editor may catch. So it's kind of, for me as a reader, it tends to go like this. I love self-publish because I really feel like the unique stories are more there because they can take all the risks and all the chances. And if something doesn't fly, they move on to the next one. Mm-hmm. Traditional publishing can't do that. They have to stick real close to where are sales, where is the market, how do we categorize this book, how do we market this book? And if they can't answer those in an immediate, here are our dollars, then, are they going to give something a shot? So, like both of you, I tend to dabble in everything, but it is mostly readers, other authors, other writers that I get recommendations from that I want to read.
Yeah. For me, it doesn't really matter as long as it's good. I will say I'm with you, Magda. I get a lot of mine from friends and family, just seeing people. And also, we've been to a couple of like local coffee shops, coffee houses, where people are sitting and reading an actual book, which I think is a novelty because I'm so used to just read. Like I read on my device all the time, right? But that's actually helped me discover a bunch of books that I want to read, and have been able to kind of find them that way. So it's kind of interesting. But I mean, to the point of like self-published versus traditional, I don't necessarily care. It is harder sometimes for me to make it through. Like I was listening to an audiobook for a new book that I just picked up this week, and there were so many mispronunciations in the audiobook that I just couldn't get past it. I was just like, ooh. No. Yeah, it was rough, right? But like the overall story was good, but it was just very hard to get past that because it kept taking you out of the world, right? So I think that's the risk you run sometimes with the self-published. That's not to say that self-published couldn't hire an editor, or they couldn't hire several of them, right? Like they can, and they should. Christina's available. But I mean, this is one of those things, like you just, that's the risk you run, is the DIY stuff could be less quality.
One of my very, very favorite writers, Taryn Fisher, the number was just mind-boggling. I think she has 5 editors, like 5 different editors. There's one that is her first reader who gives her whatever. And then like each of the editors get a different, time in the book. And then of course that includes proofreaders and other things. But I was like, wow, no wonder like every word in her book is like reading poetry, only it's not poetry, only it's mostly just kind of scary stuff, thrillers. But she's just so good.
I'm always in awe of people that are or authors that they get discovered through fan fictions. So I think like one of the writers that I really enjoy, it's Ali Hazelwood, and she was discovered by writing like Star Wars fan fiction. And they're like, you know what? You have like really good writing. And it was HarperCollins, the ones that came and found her, and they found her. And I think it was because she was coming from a point of view of like, I really want to be able to kind of see what happens with these characters, and nobody's writing it, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. And there was obviously readers that wanted to read that, and she became she developed quite a bit of a following online, and that's kind of what allowed her to become a published author in the traditional sense. We also kind of see something similar with, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Harry Potter fan fiction, but with Manacle, it's like a really big Hermione and Draco Malfoy fanfic that has a massive following. And there's actually like an audiobook in Spotify from the fan fiction. They already took everything down because it got bought and it's going to be published. And one of the main things that everybody's so excited about is like, it's going to go through editors now. So they're actually going to clean up the fan fiction, go through the whole process. So it's going to make it a lot more palatable for the people that want to be able to read this. And it's pretty exciting. And I think maybe that kind of speaks to maybe some of the voids that are kind of originating from like fan fiction that are now turning into like actual published books that people want to read.
Wow.
Yeah, I think fan fiction is really kind of a unique backdoor. It's a way to, so it's actually several points as I'm thinking about it. It's kind of the back door to testing out your writing. Are people going to read me? Number 2, there's an author, Sylvia Day, who said you literally have to write 3 books before you publish, because those 3 books are teaching you how you write, who you are as a writer. It's basically the first 3 books are figuring out what you're doing. And like, by the 3rd one, you're ready to publish. And fan fiction does a lot of that, as far as mechanics go. But it's so interesting because there are so many different ways. But I've heard of the Draco Malfoy and so are they going to change the names of the characters, or?
I don't know. All I know is that, like, I think from what I've heard, I haven't read it yet, but like each chapter kind of starts with a summary of like what happened before. So it's kind of repetitive a little bit. So now they're trying to clean that up quite a bit. They already taken, I don't think you can find it online anymore. Like they've taken as much. I'm sure you can if you go through like some dodgy sites.
Yeah.
But I get everything out. And what I was surprised is like, I didn't even know there was an audiobook for fan fiction that Spotify was like, we're going to have somebody read this out because there's so much demand for this. Even though it wasn't that great, it still needed a lot of editing, but people really wanted to consume this because I get it. Like I grew up with Harry Potter, so that's probably a void in my heart.
Yeah.
Fanfic is interesting because it has a built-in readership to some extent too, right? Like if you're already familiar with the world of something, then you have a following already built in to some extent for people that are like that. And I don't know, I feel like it's a double-edged sword. Like I love the idea of it. I love the idea of people taking a story that they love and building on it and making it their own. But there's also, I don't know, maybe it's the creator of me, but I'm like, that scares me to have something out of my hands take on this new life. And I also think it's like a cheat code. I don't know. I want people to like delve into their own stuff and create something new that's never been heard of before, not build on a structure that another artist has sort of built. I don't know. Maybe that's not fair of me, but that's, yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that feeling 100%. Like, I think it is scary. It's something, especially, can you imagine yourself as a brand new author, right? And you just get lucky enough that your debut novel just takes off. And now all of a sudden there's all this fan fiction stuff that you're like, wait a minute, hold up. Like, I haven't gotten a chance to like build this out yet, right? Like, it's, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. But I went to the school of Nora Roberts. A lot of people ask her, oh, don't you hate that? That was made into a movie and it was terrible or whatever. She says, no, my book still exists. It's still my book. It still exists. Everybody can go out and read my books. They're still there and great. So I kind of feel like that about fan fiction. The author's book is still there. And maybe people that, okay, so just using Draco and Hermione as an example, maybe someone had never heard of Harry Potter and they're like, oh, this fan fiction is so good. I wonder how the book is, and go read it. So clearly not that, but I know for a little bit, just a little bit after Heartstopper was over season 1 and we were in this long wait for 2 and 3, and I read all the books, all of her books. I did go on to, what is it, AO3 or something like that. It's a fan fiction. And I was reading Heartstopper and I was like, oh, I love this. This is great. They get to live on for a little while. Do I know who wrote it? Absolutely. Was it better than what she did? No. I can still go back to Charlie and Nick and her stuff. Yeah. I think someone should make money off it. See, that's why I'm worried about the Hermione Draco thing, because I'm like, ooh, what publisher is taking that on to like, ooh, let's comb through this copyright on these Harry Potter books, and can we use the names, and can we use references, and what do we need to, that's just a...
Yeah.
I do love I have to say though, like I do love a reimagining, because even in the same example, like Magda and I recently read a book by Ladarian Williams called Blood at the Root, which it's not a fan fiction of a Harry Potter. It's a reimagining of a magical school from the perspective of a young Black boy. And he has said, like, he, as a young Black boy reader, like loved Harry Potter books, loved fantasy, but didn't see himself in them. And the story, like he said, it's like, imagine if Harry Potter went to an HBCU. And that's what hooked us, because we're like, okay, we have a place to start from in this world. We kind of get the vibe, but like the book is nothing at all like Harry Potter. It is in sort of like he's out of school, you get to meet his friends. But that for me was like, oh, this is something new. This is something different. This is a gap in this genre that I've never heard before. So like that is a version of like the fan fiction that I think is more interesting. It's not referencing anything in Harry Potter. It's just using the architecture of the genre in a way that's not been told before. And that I think is like that in its best version for me.
Yeah, that's really cool. That is really cool.
And I think that's why that was so authentic, though, because I think he was bringing it from his own experience. And I think that kind of circles back to what we were talking about.
I 100% agree. No, I was going to segue just into, we've kind of hit on a lot of the things that we're either yearning for or that we've really loved. But what about things that we're just like, okay, enough already. I don't need any more. Stop. Just stop.
I can't. I personally don't believe. Like there are things that I'm done with. Like I'm going to take a little break from romantasy. It was like my favorite genre for a long while. I'm not seeing anything that's like hitting me in the right place. But like I am a firm believer that like if that's your genre and you want to read 300 iterations of the same book, like I want that for someone. I don't ever want to say make less of it. Like make more of it. I want 7,000 books. I don't know. I personally am like, yeah, make it all. I want to see every book you can offer.
Okay, I like it.
Maybe, yeah, like I'm kind of on the same boat. Like I think there's something for everybody out there. I think personally, like I think when Lindsey mentioned the romantasy, but also like, I don't know, there's a lot out there. This could get me in trouble, but a lot of the self-help books, maybe there's so much out there that I'm like, is there like an actual need for this, or are we kind of preying on somebody that is like in need of help? And I think that kind of, listen, I'm
Yeah.
not a trained professional. I don't know anything about this. But every time I go into a bookstore, I'm like, wow, there's something for everybody. But I mean, again, there's something for everybody out there. And maybe one of those books is going to speak to them. But yeah, I don't know.
No, Magda's right. No more diet books. No more self-help
Yes.
books. None of those. Get those out of here. That's the only one that I'm
Yes.
like, I don't want to see another one ever in my life.
Well,
But
Yeah.
everything else.
I agree. I agree. I think for me, I'll sort of adopt that a little bit of the middle of that, right? Which is I 100% align with that. I'm good with that. I'm on board. Let's get on that train. But the other side, to your point, Lindsey, I feel like it's sort of the pineapple on pizza debate, right? Like you don't have to like it, but if somebody else does, okay, great, run with it, go. But I'm not touching it. That might get me in trouble, you see.
Yeah, I have always been that way. I mean, my moniker has always been book matchmaker, but that came from my store days when I worked in the store and then when I was at the home office at Borders, because I realized very early on, this was just a few years into, I was still in college, working at the bookstore, and I was running a romance book club. And there were two people in the book club that absolutely loved Diana Palmer. I couldn't get through one page of Diana Palmer. So it actually made me take a step back as a bookseller and say, okay, I don't need to recommend books I love to these people. I need to find books that they will love. So I need to find, okay, so the two women that love Diana Palmer, I just need to understand who writes like Diana Palmer in order to suggest to them. So I come from a completely different background in that way. So, and also as an editor, putting that same on, I have people coming to me who are writing genres and subgenres and tropes and things like that that have been done a million times. But when you read it from that one person and they have a different voice and a different thought and and they can do so much of I'm going to, one and only time I think I've ever done this on this podcast. I have a romance writer who writes motorcycle club books, and I was tired of them. But I read her first book, and I actually had a personal conversation with Lorelei James, and we were both like, this is somebody we know. This is another romance writer that we know who is written under a new name. And of course, she came out and said, no. This is my first book. I'm like, it can't be. But she wrote that subgenre so different from everybody else. So, and it was far into Sons of Anarchy was probably almost done. And there was a laundry list of other writers writing motorcycle club books, but she did it so magically. So I'm never one that is going to say, don't write that trend, because you always have a different perspective. You're always a different person writing it, and you're going to bring your own experiences, like you were talking about with that Black boy who didn't see himself in Harry Potter. That's the kind of things that we need, is what is missing from that great trend that you can insert into it. This motorcycle club author, she's just, the way she writes is poetry, and it made the genre feel totally different. So yeah, so I'm not one that's going to say this is overdone, because what if there's that one person out there that really wants to write something and they've got a fantastic idea, a new twist on it. So yeah.
The only thing I could think of potentially that might be universal is vampires.
Oh,
Like,
no.
I think if you ask the universe, like, what should we stop writing? They might say, just off the top, as a hot take, right? They might say that. I don't agree.
No,
You should write what you
I don't
want,
agree
but
either. What would we do in the shadows?
Feels like that would be pop culture. I don't know.
I'm fine with more. I want more vampires.
Yeah. I'll take it.
Well, and like I think to
Awesome.
y'all's point though, like I think yes, we have a lot of vampire stories, but like if you look at different books, the vampires look different and the origins of them
Yeah.
is different. So I think kind of keeping that fresh perspective, or at least attempting to, is what's going to keep the readers engaged.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. If you've got a new idea on something and you're really super excited about it, write it. Because not only does that authenticity and excitement come through, the new idea is something that we've never seen, you know? And I think that to me is always my reader discussion. Is there's always something new and a new way of looking at it that's going to feel fresh.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you say that, like, I think about this one story that I would have never, ever sought out on my own, but I happened upon it. It was a self-published, I guess, novella. It wasn't very long, but it was about two serial killers that crossed paths and then are all of a sudden in this like life and death struggle to outdo one another, but like to literally kill each other. And it's this whole fight too of how they kind of go about it. And it was such a wild story. Again, nothing I would have ever sought out, but I just happened upon it. I think somebody had mentioned it on social media or whatever. I found it, read it, was enthralled with it. And I have not to this day been able to find it again. Like, couldn't tell you who the author was. And it just kills me. But it's one of those things where you find this story, right, that some person who was very talented at writing put out into the world, wasn't traditionally published, and it was a fantastic story. And again, not something I would have normally gravitated towards.
Okay, if this is you and you know that this is your book that Matt is describing, you must write into the podcast so we can figure out what this is.
Please tell me. Yeah. But it's awesome. So I love being able to discover stuff like that.
So I think what would be great is if we wrap up this podcast asking one last question. In the last year, in the last few months, whatever, what is the one book
That
okay, so if there's more than one, fine, more than one, that you would say everybody must read this right now because it is so good and there's not enough attention around it? What would it be?
Oh my gosh. This is such a hard question. I'm literally looking at my bookshelf like, what is that one?
And let me look at the books I've read this year.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you go, Magda.
I was going to say, if it doesn't have enough attention, I think I think immediately, like, I think my highlight for this year is still to this day, it's going to be Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. But like that one's getting enough attention. Like it's being made into a movie. It's really big. Go actually do the audiobook because it's amazing. One of the best things I've heard. But if you want something that doesn't have enough attention, I think there's a book called Real Americans by Rachel Kong. And it's a multi-generational family story. And this is not something that I would normally seek out. I think Lindsey will attest to this. And it's a beautiful story about an immigrant family that just stuck with me. And it's 3 different generations told from 3 different point of views. And it's amazing. I don't feel like a lot of people talk about this book. And it's a beautiful, enthralling story. And people should read that.
Can't pick just one. Can I pick 2?
Yeah.
Can I be greedy and pick 2?
Yes.
Okay. Because it's like we're all over the Magda and I read everything. We're like, the benefit of having each other is that we force each other to read everything. So it just totally depends on your mood. But we read a book recently that we both loved called The Games Gods Play by Abigail Owen. Thank you. That's the direction I was hoping for, Magda. It's sort of like a Hunger Games, but within the lens of Greek mythology. It's just like a fun read. Like, it's satisfying. The characters are 3-dimensional. It's emotionally mature. It has a strong female lead, but she's not like super heroic. Like, it's just solid in the genre in a way that is not like a totally retold. And yeah, it's so good. So good. But that one's just like a good like little snack. And then the thing that I've been thinking about a lot is Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors.
Oh, that sounds fascinating.
And I'm not going to tell you anything about it because it's so much better to go in cold with that title and be like, what is this freaking book about?
Well, that's what I'm thinking is this title is just, oh my God.
For me, and it isn't, this wasn't intentional. This just came up with this question. Not because he's been on the podcast, but it is Michael Fedor's How to Kill a Bull Moose. Really, really, really fell in love with that story. And that's kind of my genre anyway. So it's sort of natural maybe that is the case, but it was such a well-told story. And I just really, 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 really fell in love with it. So
now I feel like I have to pick a different one because mine is also someone we've had on the podcast. So as an editor, I do a lot of reading and editing. And so sometimes I find it difficult to just be a reader. But Ruby Dixon, when I had a client and really kind of another industry member that were both like, you've got to read Ice Planet Barbarians. And seriously, if you two have not read Ice Planet Barbarians, go download it right now. Because I was really expecting it to be just simple. And like, I'm not a sci-fi reader. I'm romance, but I'm not sci-fi. And I read the first one and I immediately downloaded the second and read it. And in a week, I had gone through like 8 books. And I don't even know how many there are. There's probably like 30.
Yeah, there's like
there's
something.
Spin-offs and there's spin-offs and we had her on recently for Bull Moon Rising, which romantasy, speaking of which, is kind of in that it really felt to me like, Shadow and Bone, that kind of tone and feel, kind of like steampunk meets historical a little bit, but yet modern. So that's kind of like that steampunk. But Ice Planet Barbarians, that to me, man,
yes.
It made me a reader again. It totally brought me back to a time where I was not reading to sell. I was not reading to edit. I was not reading to market books. It brought me back to being a reader again. So that's got to be mine.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, Magda, Lindsey, thank you so much for being on the show. Would love to give you just a moment to kind of shout out, talk a little bit more about anything you want to promote, whether it's the podcast itself or whatever. So take it away.
All right, so you can find our podcast. We're on all of our socials, on Instagram mostly. If you guys want to follow us, we're _literallybooks. And then you can also check out our website at literallybooks.com. You're going to see all of our socials listed there, episodes, book reviews, all the kind of fun stuff. Lindsey, I don't know if I missed anything.
They have video? They're on video. You can see them.
You can see us. Unfortunately, you can see us. You can see us laugh at each other all day while we talk about literally every and any kind of book you can think of.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, it was a lot of fun having you on. I know we had a blast when we were on your show. So if you guys haven't listened to that, please head out and do that now as well. Again, thank you both very, very much for joining us. And you know what? Thank you for listening. Keep on writing, keep on creating, keep on sharing it with the world because the world deserves to hear your voice. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. We really hope that you're enjoying every bit of it, but we would love to hear your feedback. Drop us an email either to matt@writeoutloudpod.com or Christina@bookmatchmaker.com. We would love to hear your thoughts. What's working, what's not working, and what do you want to hear more of? Thanks so much. We really appreciate it.